So last week we discussed the introduction of Arokh HaShulhan, and we got to his description of the composition of the Mishnah by Rabbi-ovadia and his argument that everything in the Mishnah is well calculated and edited, and we said that we have to. This is something that have to be analyzed, and it doesn't really stand the test of criticism when you look at the text of the Mishnayot. Even the Talmud itself, in many cases, says mehalek ale melaf mina or mehalek ale medak mina, meaning you cannot reach a conclusion or logical deduction from the text of the Mishnah. You only have what's there for you. So we are in this paragraph, Omnam, which is part of his paragraph on the Talmud. Omnam lav kol muha savilda lavina mitoch kitzur mishnayot. Not everybody is capable of understanding all the halachot based on the abbreviated Mishnah, and therefore, in the time of Ravina and Rav Ashi and their contemporaries, the editing of this great and sacred Talmud has been accomplished, and since then we're not allowed to add or to take away from the Talmud, only to toil on understanding what is said there. We also briefly touched this paragraph last week. Have in mind the following problems. The assumption that Rav and Rav Ashi edited the Talmud is based on a statement that they had Mahadura Kama and Mahadura Batra, first and second Mahadura. Mahadura was understood as addition, but so they did the two editions of the Talmud, so it would make sense to argue that they edited the Talmud once and then edited twice, final editing, and that was the sealing of the Talmud. However, it is obvious that the word Mahadura does not refer to an addition, but rather to the word, it comes from the Aramaic hadar, which means hazar, to repeat, and that means that they have repeated or did a full cycle of the whole Talmud, whatever was available to them in their yeshiva, and not only they did it once, they did it twice, so we assume it took them 2-3 decades to do one cycle. Additionally, this statement, Talmud Gadol v'Kadosh, the attachment of the label Kadosh to the Talmud is problematic. We have no sanctified or sacred text other than the Tanakh. The Tanakh is the only sacred text that we have. All the other texts are religious texts, halachic texts, revered, etc., but they're not holy. The idea of holiness as something that stems directly from the Word of God is problematic when attached to the Talmud. And finally, this statement that we have no permission to add or to omit from the Talmud is also ideal, or maybe we could call it wishful thinking, but it is not accurate. The accuracy of that statement is that where there is a clear psak halacha, a clear statement in the Talmud, usually later generations will not go against it, but in terms of editing the text, this was done up until the time of the Gaonim, was done freely by the Savoraim or the Stamaim, the anonymous rabbis who worked as a group, which later on the Rishonim they call them just Gemara or Bnei Bet HaMidrash, the students in the academy, but their names are usually not mentioned. We have very few names mentioned there, and later on, also in the time of Rabbeinu Tam and Baalei Tosafot, rabbis took the freedom of correcting texts that they felt were distorted. So, although there were no major additions into the text of the Talmud, but there were corrections and omissions where the scribe felt that something was missing, and this is a general problem with the manuscripts. There are two types of scribes. There's the learned scribe and the ignorant scribe. And the learned one is more dangerous than the ignorant one, because the ignorant can only copy the text, so he's basically a Xerox machine. So if he sees a mistake, only a glaring mistake with grammar or something like that, he might fix it, but he will not try to introduce a new text to replace the text that he thinks is flawed or problematic, whereas a learned scribe or scholar might do such a thing. It became such a problem that Rabbeinu Tam at a certain point had to, in the 11th, 12th century, had to declare a ban, an excommunication on anyone who would dare correct the books Hagahat Asfarim. But that continued in his time. It continued later on. It continued. The Gaon of Vilna is known for correcting all of the Tannaitic and Talmudic texts, Mishnah, Tosefta, Midrashei Halacha, Talmud, usually without sufficient grounds, only based on his learning, and those were accepted in the Orthodox Yeshiva world, but modern research is digging into them, and a lot of them are highly contested. So that is regarding the additions to the Talmud. Also, in terms of Psak, we see that when the rabbis felt that they want to deviate from the Talmudic Psak, they did that. One example is the halacha of moredet, of a woman who denies her husband sexual relationships. She argues that she doesn't like him, that he's repugnant, his behavior is unacceptable, where the Geonim ruled against the law of the Talmud and allowed that woman to receive her get immediately and be paid the ketubah. So this paragraph, as I said, is the idealistic visualization of what the Talmud is about, or wishful thinking, but it was not so in practice. In practice, people did add and changed the Talmud. In that context, I also just mentioned it by passing the important discovery of Professor Dimitrovsky of what is called the Sephardic Talmud. There was a Sephardic Nusa, the Sephardic version of the Talmud that was not that was kept in Sepharad and was not as manipulated or doctored as was the version that was in France and Germany, where the people felt more freedom to change the text, like I just mentioned, to the point that Rabbeinu Tam had to excommunicate those who did that. Now he goes into this. ואלו הם ראשי אלפי ישראל שהיו אחר זמן חתימת התלמוד, כל גאוני מזרח ומערב, כל עמלם היה להבין דברי התלמוד. So the leaders of the generations following the final edition of the Talmud, the scholars of Mizrach u'Ma'arav, it's hard to tell what exactly or to whom exactly is Rabbi Epstein referring when he says Mizrach u'Ma'arav. It is there are two possibilities. One is that Mizrach is Bavel and Ma'arav is Eretz Israel, because that was in the time of the Geonim. The two leading centers were Bavel and Eretz Israel. Bavel was considered east, Eretz Israel was considered Ma'arav, west, and I don't think that Rabbi Epstein saw the addition, or maybe he did, of the first Teshuvot of the Geonim called Teshuvot Geonim Mizrach u'Ma'arav. So there was an anthology that was put by that name. The other possibility that he thinks of East and West as the Middle East and Europe. It's also a possibility because in his time the term East to describe the Middle East was already used, definitely in Germany. So this is a possibility. What did they do? It says Kol amalam haya le'avin divrei Talmud. All their toil was to understand the meaning of the Talmud. וחיברו עליו פירושים רבים ותוספת לפירושים. They wrote commentaries and additions to the commentaries. וזכינו שנתקבלו בכל תפוצות ישראל פירושי אור התורה, המנורה הטהורה ראשי ז"ל, מפני שהעלה בפירושו כל מה שקיבל מרבותיו. And he says we had the merit that the commentaries of Rashi Zal were accepted by all the communities of Am Yisrael, because he presented in his commentary everything that he received from his masters. וזכינו לתוספת רבותיו הצרפתים. I think that the something here should have been רבותינו הצרפתים, because the masters of Rashi were German. He went to study in German under Rabbeinu Gershom Mor Agola in Worms and in Speyer. So we have the commentaries of Rashi, and the commentaries of the French rabbis, speaking about the students and the descendants of Rashi, שהיו גדולים בחוכמה ובמניין מכל חכמי ישראל שבימיהם. They were greater in wisdom and in number of all other scholars of their days. כי שמונים בעלי תוספות למדו מפני הארי החי רבנו הגדול רבנו תם ז"ל, because there were 80 masters of Tosafot, of additional commentaries, who studied mipenei BBP directly from the mouth of the living lion, our great Rabbi Rabbeinu Tam. It's Rabbeinu Yaakov of Ramrug, the grandson of Rashi. כמו שכתוב בתשובת מהרש"ל, and as a source he quotes תשובת מהרש"ל, Rabbi Shlomo Luria, who lived in Poland in the 16th century. והם עשו את ים התלמוד כחדור והאירו נתיבותיו, ובלעדי דבריהם הקדושים נמשש בו כאשר ימשש העיוור באפלה. And he says, and they turned the Talmud into the sea of Talmud. They made it into a ball, kechadur, and they lit its paths. And without their holy words, we are going to move through the Talmud as in obscurity, as a blind man goes in darkness. So this is an extremely important paragraph, because he describes the status of the Talmud and the process of the commentaries that were written on the Talmud in different places. So let's now go back to the beginning of this paragraph and analyze it and see how it works historically and what is missing here. So he says that Kol Amalam, the toil of all the great rabbis who lived after the Talmud, was to understand the Talmud, and they wrote many commentaries in addition to the commentaries. This describes the reality, or not the reality, but more of the reality in the Ashkenazi world and less of the Sephardic world. In the Sephardic world, like we mentioned last week, we have the Rif, Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi, and we have the Rambam, both of whom try to push the Talmud aside, even though they recommended for people, for the scholars, that the learning of Talmud, the study of Talmud, they still created substitutes. Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi created the abridged Talmud, the Shas Hilchot Rav Ilfas, and Rambam presented the Mishneh Torah as a substitute for the Talmud, and he said that you could go directly from the Torah to Mishneh Torah. Additionally, in the Sephardic world, there was this very strong emphasis on halakha. Everybody studied halakha, and we probably mentioned it before. Israel Tashma, in his studies, shows that the major halachic works were written in Sepharad, and that was the interest of Sephardic rabbis to reach a halachic conclusion which is practical and binding, and not leave things hanging. There were also cases of practical solutions offered by Baalei Tosafot, but mostly the study of the Gemara was understood as dialectics, as possibilities of opening new distinctions, and that could have been ad infinitum. You could just go on and on and on and split every decision and every conclusion into other possibilities, which in turn prevented people from reaching psak halacha, and also caused the proliferation of many minhagim, many different customs and practices in the Ashkenazi diaspora. So, we're going back to the Sephardic world. The study of Talmud was only one part of the curriculum, alongside sciences, general sciences, and knowledge was important. The understanding of grammar, the Hebrew language, the study of Tanakh, all these were part of the Sephardic curriculum. In the Ashkenazi world, the study of Tanakh was pushed aside, but Kabbalah was of great interest, so there were other things other than Talmud. But here, Rabbi Epstein chooses to highlight only the Talmud. And he says, in all of Am Yisrael, the commentaries of Rashi were accepted, because he presented everything that he received from his master. So here it's important to speak about the commentary of Rashi in the context of understanding the Talmud. Rashi did provide a breakthrough in the field of studying Talmud, because up to his time, the knowledge of Talmud, the knowledge of understanding Talmud and commenting on Talmud was reserved to the and monopolized by the Rashi Yeshivot in Bavel. The Gaonim of Bavel established their hegemony over the Jewish communities, and the question that they would receive from all over the world were not just questions of halakha, but also questions of how to understand the words of the Talmud. And they tried to maintain knowledge as much as possible, because knowledge was power. Also made contributions to the yeshivot, maintaining the royal courts. At one point, they went into a campaign against the yeshivot of Eretz Israel, and they were eventually successful in demoting them and causing people to abandon the study of Talmud Yerushalmi. That was done mainly by Pirkoi ben Bavoy, who was a student of Rabbi Yehuda Gaon in the 8th or 9th century. And but the Gaonim at a certain point, because they already trained so many people in teaching, in learning the Talmud, even though they did it by segments, there was enough knowledge and interest in satellite communities of the Gaonic center in Bavel to create their own yeshivot, their own rabbis. Rashi was the first one to try and write a concise commentary on all of the Talmud. He didn't accomplish the task. There are several masechtot like Nazir, Nedarim, most of Bava Batra, that do not have a commentary by Rashi, and it is very clear when you depart, when you leave the commentary of Rashi and move into the commentary of someone else. The commentary on Bava Batra was accomplished, but was completed by his grandson, the Rashbam. Others were written by anonymous authors that we don't know who, we don't know their names, but it says Amiyuhas Rashi, attributed to Rashi, and you could tell the difference. The beauty of Rashi's commentary is its flow. It's fluid. In most places, it's fluid. He integrates the text of the Talmud into his commentary. So when Rashi uses what we call Dibur HaMathil, he takes the text from the Talmud and adds, as we usually would do that with brackets. With him is Dibur HaMathil. It's a period or a semicolon to mark the end of the text, but you can read the whole thing as one unit. There are rare exceptions where Rashi deliberates more in the sugya, and it's worth analyzing. Wherever Rashi steps out of his I would say his role as a concise commentator of the Talmud and expands on the sugya, we have to ask, why does he do that? Like one of the glaring examples is a sugya where the rules of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ishmael are mentioned, and the Gemara speaks about ribui haribui, mi'ut haribui, which are the rules. Those are the rules as they're phrased by Rabbi Akiva. When we speak about exclusion and inclusion, Rabbi Akiva calls them mi'ut ve'ribui, whereas Rabbi Ishmael calls them klal uprat. So Rashi goes into great length to explain why in most of the Talmud the terms klal uprat uchlal is used, which comes from the school of Rabbi Ishmael, and not the terminology of Rabbi Akiva. And that is a problem because we believe, or that seems to be the general gist of the Talmudic sugya, that we follow the halachic interpretation of Rabbi Akiva. So that's one example of Rashi deviating from his norm of being very concise. But what Rashi did to the study of Talmud was that he was the first one who enabled people to get a more comprehensive knowledge of Talmud. Up to his time, most people studied only certain topics, and even after his time, in most of the Sephardic yeshivot, only 3 orders of the Talmud were studied: Nashim, Nezikim, and Moed. What Rashi did, largely relying on the commentaries of Rabbeinu Gershom Meor HaGolah, but expanding it, he created the first brief commentary to the Talmud that enabled people to study as many masechtot, as many tractates of Talmud as was possible. It added to that that Rashi had a sort of a scientific approach, and he read all the whatever was available in literature. We don't know if he read beyond what was immediately necessary for his commentary, but he quotes works of geography, of grammar. He was aware of Haim ibn Arokh and Ibn Janah and other Sephardic grammarians. He once in a while in his other commentaries uses Arabic words. He makes references to French, which was a spoken language of his time. He speaks about, like I said, the geography, tried to get into history. Rashi was also a posek. Unlike many other commentators, he was a posek. He was someone who ruled for the community and understood the needs of the community. So his commentary goes in that direction of providing an easy path to understanding the Gemara. Once he did that, the road for Ba'alei HaTosafot was paved, and they were able to now study the whole Talmud, and even in some cases have the whole set of Talmud at home. To us today, it seems obvious that everybody would have the whole Talmud at home. It's easy to get. The Talmud is also available online. Back in the day, people had some volumes of Talmud at home. Very few people owned all of the Talmud, and that in a way that was accessible to them. That description of Shmonim Ba'alei Tosafot that is written by Maharshal, we have to realize that it comes from a much, much later period, 300 or 400 years later. There are other descriptions that speak about 300 rabbis studying together. These are all exaggerations. We know from testimonies about specific Batei Midrash in Germany and France that there will be 20 or 30 people maximum in a hall of study. And that statement also, Rabotenu HaTzarfatim hayu gedolim b'chokhmah u'binyan mikol chachmei Yisrael shebimehem, also has no basis. The leaders of the Ba'alei HaTosafot in France, Rabbeinu Tam, Rabbeinu Yitzchak HaZaken, and Rashbam, and Rabbeinu Meir, all these were great sages and great scholars, but at the same time, they were very powerful and important centers in North Africa. The center in Bavel was already declining, but the centers in North Africa, Kairouan and Kalat Hamad was already sort of getting out of its role as a center, but the Kehilot in Spain, Lucena, Cordova, other places, Kehilot in Egypt, there were rabbis, there were scholars all over, and there's no base for that argument that Ba'alei HaTosafot were greater both in number or in wisdom than all other scholars in their days. But that grants a special halo to their commentary on the Talmud. Now, when we get to this statement, it's a famous statement, Hem asu et yama Talmud kechadur. They turned the ocean of Talmud to a ball. So what is the meaning of that statement? So the metaphor of Yama Talmud, the ocean is deep. It's not something that you could control, measure, conquer easily. Kadur, on the other hand, is a ball that you could roll around in your hand, and this is where we use the model of the globe to look at Earth. The idea of Kadur is that they were able to interrelate all the sugyot and all of this, the discussion in the Talmud, and in that they deviate from the way of Rashi. When we could say that this happens with most commentaries, we spoke in the past about the pendulum of genre in commentary. Once you peruse one, you've exhausted one way, then you find a new method. Once that new method has been exhausted, you might go back to the original one or find a new one. So what is the main difference between Rashi and Tosafot? Rashi comments on the local sugya. It is very rare for Rashi to compare and contrast sugyot. Rashi is not interested. Maybe he's not interested, or maybe he didn't have the time, but he is not interested in a contradiction from a different sugya if it has not been mentioned by the Talmud. He would not say, how can the Talmud say this in Bava Batra when something else is written in Sanhedrin? That is not the type of questions that Rashi asks. Rashi comments on the local sugya, whereas the Tosafot always compare and contrast other sugyot. If you take a typical Tosafot, and I'm sure that everybody who was first introduced to Tosafot feel a little confused in the beginning, trying to figure out what exactly they're after, because they will present 4 or 5 questions and 4 or 5 solutions. But I would say that 50 or 60, if not more, percent of the discussion in Tosafot is an extension of the Talmudic discussion. They ask whatever the Talmud did not ask. They would ask, why is this Masechta placed after that Masechta? Why tractate, for example, Nazir follows Nedarim, if it does, or why this Mishnah follows this Mishnah? Why did the Tana, the author of the Mishnah, why did he fail to mention A, B, C? What will it do with the Sugya in another tractate that contradicts that Sugya? And they extend and expand the scope of the Talmud to Sugya that the Talmud did not have time to deal with, or they did not deem important. Now, once that was done, the work of the next generations was to reconcile and this is still done in the yeshivot today, to try to understand the difference between Rashi and Tosafot, and how both of them relate to the sugya of the Talmud. My own Rosh Yeshiva and Rosh Kolel, with him I studied Havruta for 3 years, Rabbi Moshe Shimon Mayarnik, Zechrono Livracha. His shurim were built around that idea of how do you reconcile Rashi and Tosafot. He would ask, V'chi Rashi lo yada ma Tosafot rotzim lish'ol. Like Rashi knew what the question of Tosafot, so why didn't he ask it? So he had to find a way to show that Rashi was aware of the kushya, of the question of Tosafot, but did not worry about it because he has a different interpretation, and that Tosafot understood that this is what Rashi thought, but they had a different argument against him, and he would also try to show that there was an order, an internal order to the question of Tosafot. Now, I'm not sure that this always works, and I think that like all the commentaries on the Talmud and on the commentaries on the Talmud, commentaries on Rashi, and especially what happens today in the yeshiva world, this explosion of analysis is a lot of it has nothing to be based on. This is an exercise that you could do with any text, especially legal text, that when you take and try to break it down to pieces, there will be different interpretations, and then if you attribute to those analysis and those commentaries a sacred status of their own, you will have to study every word there. Soon enough, you have literature that cannot really be encompassed and controlled. And I always heard that argument from my rabbis in the yeshiva, saying that there's no other example of halachic literature like ours. The Torah is the only one that has such expansive view. We have a library that is incredible of halakha. Turns out that the same phenomenon exists. It exists in Islam that are much later than the Mishnah, the sacred text. A professor that I knew from UCLA, an expert on Muslim law, in his book Khalab al-Fadl, in his book it has a book about Islamic law that hopefully we'll discuss once, because there are analogies between the development of the Muslim law and the way people consider Torah shebichtav, Torah shebe'al peh. Of course, from a scholarly point of view, not claiming that it has a divine source, but in this book, Great Theft, he writes in the introduction that in his own library there are 50,000 books of Islamic law, and they all stem from the Quran. So the possibility of creating legal text based on a single book is not rare. We did that, so that's what we did with the Talmud. It was for the first 100, 200 years after the Rif, or 300 years, we could say that the trend in Ashkenaz, in Adad Rashi and Tosafot, was to expand and extend the scope of the Talmud, whereas in the Sephardic world it was to minimize and abridge that scope. Eventually, it was the Ashkenazi system that won over, partly because Rabbi Moshe ben Nachmanides went to study in the French yeshivot and adopted the system of Baalei Tosafot, and he was followed by his student Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Adret, and the Ritva, Rabbi Yom Tov al-Sevili. And also because, and this is I think also true regarding the system of the Shitat HaLimud, the way the Talmud is being taught in the yeshivot today, is that we enjoy, people who love thinking, let's put it this way, enjoy this intellectual appeal of the dialectics of Talmud. It's challenging to think of different definitions. It's in a way, parallel to mathematics or linguistics or semantics. So people just enjoy that, even though it has no practical solution, practical application, and maybe even because there are no practical applications. So there's never the danger of, what if I make a wrong decision? What if I make a wrong analysis? It's okay. Nothing will happen because nobody will follow it anyway. And that's why we have today this kind of distinction in the Ashkenazi yeshiva world between the posek and the Rosh Yeshiva. The Rosh Yeshiva teaches you Talmud, but if you want to know what to do, go to the posek. Also, there's something that Rabbi Meir Mazuz speaks about in his book, the Ayun, which I hope we'll get to at a certain point. But he says that how at one time he was reading a book written by an Ashkenazi Rosh Yeshiva in Israel, and he said there was a very, very long pilpul, very long analysis of a sugya in the Talmud that rested on very fine distinctions between situation and statuses, etc., etc. Since towards the end of the discussion, the author says that when he finished his mahalach, his theory, he realized that it contradicts halakha. It's not la halakha. So that's the end of the quote from the book. So Rabbi Meir Mazuz says 4 words: Aval apilpul nishar b'sefer. So, what's your point? If you realize at the end of your analysis that your conclusion is contradictory to halakha in a way that is irreconcilable, erase the pilpul. It doesn't work. It's not. I mean, if a scientist would have to prove that oxygen is unbreathable, and he did it in logical tools, right? It would say, okay, something went wrong. My analysis was wrong. My instruments were not calibrated. Something went wrong, and it would erase the researcher because we know that we breathe oxygen. Or he would find out that he's a tree. But that is the problem. So anyway, let's go back to the paragraph of the Arokh HaShulhan. It will take a while until we finish that. But those are the closer we get to our time, those statements are now dictate the way we think or describe the way people today think about Talmud and Halakha. So that last sentence, בלעדי דבריהם הקדושים נמשש בו כאשר ימשש העיוור באפלה. That is reminiscent of what Rambam and Rambam, Rabbeinu Yaakov Baal HaTurim, and Rabbi Yosef Karo said about the knowledge of previous generations. So here we have a description of the Talmud with the commentary of Rashi and the Tosafot, saying that without them, there's no way to approach the Talmud. So now it cements the the authority of the commentaries of the Talmud as an integral part of the Talmud. If you try to access the Talmud without their commentary, you'll have a serious problem. I'll give you one example where this is incorrect, where we have to rely on a commentary such as that of Rabbeinu Hananel. The Talmud, Rabbeinu Hananel ben Hushiel lived in Kairouan, North Africa. And only recently more parts of his commentary were recovered. So the Talmud in Sanhedrin has this discussion regarding Mesirut Nefesh, or regarding dying or sacrificing your life when you are being asked to transgress a certain concept of the Torah, a certain mitzvah. And the Gemara says that you are in everything ya'avor ve'al yareg, with every halacha you should transgress the prohibition and not let yourself be killed, except for three things: shfichut damim, gilui arayot, v'avodah zara, bloodshed, incest or forbidden sexual relationship, and idolatry. If one is asked to do one of those three things, he must sacrifice his life. Then the Talmud adds, this is a different discussion, I'm not going to get into all the details, but the Talmud adds there that b'sha'at hashmad afilu al mitzvah kala, and when there is a programmatic persecution against the Jews, and they try to cause people to abandon their religion, to convert to another religion, that's called shmad. It's not shmad as annihilation, because if it's annihilation anyway, they're going to kill you. But rather, shmad is the attempt to convert us away from Judaism. Afilu al mitzvah kala, even if it's a minor concept, one should sacrifice his life. What is a minor concept? The Talmud says, afilu arakta dimsana, even for a shoelace, even for the, it's not exactly a shoelace, it's more like the leather thread that people used to, for the high Roman sandals. So even for that, one should die. What is the problem with the shoelace, and why should one die for that? There are two commentaries, two explanations that are brought by Rashi and Ba'alei Tosafot. One is that the non-Jews used to tie their shoelace, used red shoelaces, and the Jews used black shoelaces. And another commentary is that they used to tie the knot in a certain way. And now the Goyim, the non-Jews, demand that the Jews will do it in a specific way. And so now, based on this interpretation of the Talmud, people in later generations sacrificed their lives because they did not want to shave their beard, or because they did not want to dress like non-Jews, because they were told that even changing a minor detail of your dress code, such as switching from black shoelaces to red shoelaces, is something that you sacrifice your life for, because this is not a Jewish practice. It has nothing to do with idolatry. It's just a non-Jewish practice. However, in the commentary of Rabbeinu Hananel, it is mentioned that when the Gemara speaks about a shoelace, it speaks about asking a person of an elevated status, someone who's the leader of the community, to worship idols. And when he refuses, they say, okay, at least pretend that you tie your shoelaces in front of the idol. Now that's a completely different story. That is the standoff of one person against the non-Jewish persecution, and where he gives in, they might, because of that, people might follow him and all convert to adapt paganism. So and that might have applied only with paganism and not with Christianity or Islam, whereas the Dachei Goyim that the Tosafot and Rashi bring would apply there. So to say that without the commentary of Rashi and Ba'alei Tosafot, we will feel our way around the Talmud as a blind man going through an obscure place is exaggerated. By the way, this phrase "Aiver ba'afela," one would argue that it doesn't make a difference for a blind person whether he is in a dark room or not, and the answer that's already asked by the Gemara because this is a pasuk from the Torah, So the Talmud already raises this question and answers that the blindness prevents the blind person from seeing, and obscurity prevents other people from seeing him and helping him. So this is the ultimate state of helplessness. Now, Rabbi Haim Ovadia go back to speak about the Talmud, and he says, all those people they included things that are related to other wisdoms, other fields of knowledge. They added agada u'drashot bidvarim shem kivshono shel olam, in things that are hidden and concealed, such as ma'aseh bereshit u'ma'aseh merkava, the act of creation, the merkava, the throne, the divine throne, u'shar chokhmot filosofiyot v'tiviyot, and also other wisdoms of philosophy and nature. But they hid them, they cover up for them with their pleasant words. And they spoke through analogies and parables, as are the stories of Rabba Bar Hana in the 5th chapter of Baba Batra, as are the arguments of Rabbi Yoshua with the elders of Athens that are mentioned in the 1st chapter of Bechorot. And it says all of the statements of our great of the sages of the Talmud in Agada. This was their method to hide the deep secrets with a garment of Agada. Not because not everyone can tolerate the direct light from the sun, and that's very powerful wisdom, so it was hidden, and therefore they dressed those ideas with several garments, and every person who's wise enough will be able to take a little bit of that wisdom if he has the merit, and if not, that is not an obstacle to learn Torah mitzvot, because with all the things that have to do with Torah mitzvah, they clearly and explicitly explained. So, just to explain this paragraph, this is part of an ongoing debate regarding the status of the non-halachic part of the Talmud. Rabbi Epstein takes sort of the middle road between the classic Sephardic approach and the Ashkenazi approach. The classic Sephardic approach started with the Geonim and continued with the statements in the Rambam and Ramban, are that the drashot, what we call midrash agada, the homilies and the commentaries on the Torah, are not to be taken literally. They could be parables or analogies, but also sometimes were only meant to be understood or to be told at a certain point in time. It's only within that context that they are understood. It's famous, for example, what Rabbi Shmuel ben Hofni Gaon says in Mevoat Talmud. There's an introduction to the Talmud called Mevoat Talmud. It is erroneously attributed to Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid. You could even in the printed editions of Talmud, you will find Mevoat Talmud leRabbeinu Shmuel HaLevi ibn Agrila. But it was not written by him. It was written by Rabbi Shmuel ben Hofni Gaon, who lived about 100 or 150 years before him, towards the end of the 9th century in Bavel, and he writes that whatever is included in the Talmud that is not a commentary on the Torah and the Mitzvah, we have to take with a grain of salt. If we understand, we accept it, and if we not, we reject it. Meaning, it doesn't say necessarily that it's a parable or analogy. It says if you can accept it in face value, you put it aside, because it is not essential to the understanding of the Talmud. But the way, and then on the other hand, you had the Ashkenazi school of thought developing later on in the time of Ba'alei Tosafot, in following generations, they took everything in the Talmud literally, and both scientific and philosophical knowledge, natural knowledge, and of course the drashot, and it came to a peak at the time of the Maharal of Prague, and the Shla in the 15th century and 16th century in Europe. where they argued that that anyone who doubts even part of the non-halachic literature of the Talmud is a heretic. There was in itself a famous debate with Rabbi Azariah di Rossi, called Rabbi Azariah Mein Adomim, in his book Meor Einaim, which hopefully we'll touch upon in a strong point. And Rabbi Epstein tried to find sort of a balance between the two opinions by saying that the rabbis included different types of wisdom and knowledge in the Talmud, but they hid them under the cover of Agadah. That could hold regarding some of the material, but for the majority of the midrashic and non-halachic material in the Talmud, this argument does not really work, especially when you say that when you speak about natural, the knowledge of the world of nature, the knowledge of the sages of the Talmud and the Mishnah was limited to what they knew from experience and from some research that was done, but not more than that. They relied greatly on Greek science. So this argument is questionable, but this is how the more moderate among Orthodox Jews think today. The more fanatic or extreme, I would say, follow the philosophy of the Hazon Ish in his letters called Emunah Bitachon, where he says that every word in the Talmud was produced by the power of prophecy. That is called Neshika Shel HaSechel HaNevu'i. It's the kiss of the prophetic mind with the logical mind. And he says anyone who questions even one word of the Tannaitic language of the Mishnah, Talmud, Tosefta, anything that we consider to be the literature of Hazal, it says Nirta'im anachnu, we recoil from such statement. Even if someone says don't take it literally, we do not accept it because it's all literal, and it's not saying so, it's heresy. So we have the two extremes, those who are willing to be more analytical and critical when it comes to non-halachic parts of the Talmud, and those who say that all is sacred. And Rabbi Epstein in Arokh HaShulhan is somewhere in between, where he says it is all valid knowledge which is hidden with the garments or with parables that not always let the light through. If you understand, fine. If you don't, just keep on studying halakha. So the next segment of the introduction of Arokh HaShulhan is about the mahlokot. I'll just read the first sentence and we'll continue next week, God willing. It says, "V'chi yipale be'ainecha al rov ha'de'ot u'machlekotam b'pirtei adinim, da ki lo mechochma sha'alta al zeh." If you're going to ask me how come there are so many different opinions and so many disputes regarding the details of the law, you should know that this is not a wise question. This is already from the opening strike, disqualifying the person who presents the answer, the question. It's not a smart question. You already feel doubt. Okay, maybe I'm mistaken. I should not have asked this question. But that is defensive. This is the reason he's offensive here, because he needs to defend the integrity of the halakha and to show how all the little details and all the disputes came from one source. But we'll stop here. We'll continue, God willing, next week.